Hi. So in this video, I want to talk about the class scope of the items that are inside the class's body. So you can call that the body scope. So we need to talk about nested scopes in class definitions. That's really important. So suppose we have this module over here, module1.py, and it contains two things essentially. It contains this class and this symbol p. So that is a scope. And that module has its own global scope that contains the symbol Python, basically this class, and the symbol p, which is this instance of the class, right? So the symbols point to other objects. So Python, the symbol points to the actual class, and p points to the instance of that class. Now, inside the class, we also have another scope going on. And it's really important to understand that the class body has its own scope, right? It's its own scope. It has that. But what is in that namespace? Well, it's kingdom, phylum, family, init, and say hello. So these things are the symbols in the body scope, in the body namespace. But what about the scope of the functions themselves, right? Init is really just a pointer to a function. Say hello is essentially a pointer to a function. What about the scopes of those functions? Are they nested inside the body, the class body scope? And it turns out that they are not. So the symbols init and say hello are in the class body namespace, but the functions themselves are nested in the class's containing scope. So in this case, these functions themselves, the objects, the function objects, their scope is actually nested inside the module1 scope, not inside the class's body scope. So you can think of it this way. Let's just relook again at the same thing. So we've got the module scope on the outside. We've got the class scope here, the body scope over here. So init, say hello, family, phylum, kingdom are all symbols in that namespace. But init is basically equal to some other object, callable 1. Say hello is equal to some other object, callable 2. And those objects are functions, but they exist inside module 1. They exist inside that outer scope. So you can think of it that way. We could definitely create these two functions in the module, and then we could set up our init to be this function and our say hello to be that function. There it's a lot clearer that the scope of this function is not contained inside the scope of the class body, it's contained inside the scope of the module. So when Python looks for a symbol in a function, it will not use the class body scope. It's never going to look there. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, let's say we create this account class and we create these class attributes, the compound interest frequency, an annual percentage rate, and the annual percentage yield. Now, you can see this APY is referencing APR, comp frequency, and comp frequency. It's in the same scope as the class body. So this APR over here really means this symbol over here. Python understands that because all these are symbols in the same namespace, right? They're all in the same scope. Now let's say that we create this instance method and we reference self.apy. Now that works because we use self.apy. Self is looking at the instance of the account, and eventually it's going to find its way back to this APY over here that was defined as a class attribute. Same thing as if we write a class method. Because we specify class.apy, it will know where to find APY. With a static method, we can do it, but now we just have to say account.apy. Again, this works because we tell Python where APY is located, which scope, which namespace should it look in. On the other hand, this is unlikely to work because APY over here, right, where does Python look for it? It is not going to look for it over here because the namespace of this function is nested outside of this account namespace, right? So unless APY is defined somewhere outside of the class in another nested namespace, maybe at the module level, at the global level, then Python isn't going to find APY. So that's most likely going to fail. Now you've got to be careful with that, because if you do have it defined in the module, it will use that one. And so that can lead to some very subtle bugs. And in the coding section next, I'm going to show you all that, and you'll hopefully get a better understanding of what's going on with these scopes. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.